I have a few questions before we get started. One is kind of basic. How do you spell your last name?
Very good. Most people misspell it. It is Linhart. Linhart.
So there's an H in it.
There's an H in there, but everyone always puts a D where the H is supposed to be.
I raise my hand as one of those people. Um, Lindhart. So,
Linhart. No Lind. Linhart. Linhardt. The D's at the end.
okay, we'll just go with Christina, if that's okay.
Yes.
The other thing I saw in my notes was that you do a lot of work with veterans.
Yes.
Could you tell me some more about that?
Yes, so I work with a theater as therapy program, but it's not drama therapy. It's called the Imagination Workshop. It's been under the auspices of the Neuropsychiatric Institute of UCLA, and it was founded back in the 60s by the playwright Lyle Kessler and the soap actress or daytime television actress Margaret Ladd. And I've been working then with Imagination Workshop for 20 years. I started when I was 5. And we've been working with the veterans at New Directions. And New Directions is a recovery program at the VA hospital. So it's on VA campus, it's live in, it's for mostly unhoused PTSD veterans with substance abuse. So they're in recovery.
So, how does it work?
So instead of like with drama therapy, you draw upon what has happened in your own life. With our work, Imagination Workshop, we use improvisation and we create new characters. It's very playful, it's very G rated. We don't get into heavy drama at all. And it kind of is going back to playing make believe when you were a child. We do have a structure with a warm up and a passing, and then the main body, which are improvisations. And we just have them make up characters. And then when we've gotten grants, when we've received grants, we sometimes put on an actual play that the veterans have written themselves. And we have a psychoanalyst who does reports for us. And one of the constant comments we get in the reports is that the veterans often say, for once, I don't have to be my past. For once, I don't have to be my PTSD. I don't have to be my trauma. I don't have to be my addiction. I can be somebody new because we're just playing these new characters. So it's giving a new opportunity. And one man once, he was, of course, a lot of these guys, all they're veterans and they've served, but they also come from gang culture a lot. And one of the men, he had the gang tattoos on his face, and he was an older gentleman. He said, all my life, people would move away from me on the bus and they'd react to me a certain way. And he said, now for once, I feel maybe people can see me differently. I can be somebody else.
And what is your specific role in this organization?
So I lead the workshops. So I run the workshops. We do it in a circle. And so as we're all equal, we all play characters, but I just lead them through the characters. And then when we put on a play, I'm usually the one producing the play. And one of my colleagues usually does the directing. But we both, start them from scratch on building the play and writing the play. So it's the hands-on doing the workshop. And I have to say, for me too, when I first started training and doing the workshop and doing the exercises, my mood changed. It helped me a lot. I'd gone through depression like so many of us artists have, and it helped me just doing it and facilitating it.
Can you remember a time when you were surprised with what characters somebody came up with that was sort of genuinely, I didn't see that coming?
Yes, probably all the time. I had one gentleman, he was a big white guy, and he did have some tattoos on him that might have suggested certain communities he was part of in prison that might have been
Limiting?
limiting, exactly, limiting his his social circle. And then all of a sudden he was using, and he's huge, 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 huge. And then he was using this squeaky little voice and playing like a little mouse character or something. It was really quite surprising. But what I do have to say is that what's been fabulous is, our population of veterans is very mixed. It's predominantly Black and some white. We don't have as many Asian or Latino, But I've had a couple of veterans who had, again, gang tattoos that showed white gang tattoos that showed they had limiting circles. And next thing you know, they're best friends with people who might not have been in that original limiting circle.
Are
And that's
there, I'm sorry, are there any women in the group?
so the women, there is New Directions for Women, and that's a separate facility. And they used to have an off-campus house, and several times we brought the women in for the play, and that worked wonderfully. And then one of our women is the most amazing woman. She's a graduate of the program. She's living on her own, working, going to school, doing fabulously, but she always comes back to do the play because she's just a superstar. And now on VA campus, they just a couple months ago opened the Oasis for female veterans, also unhoused, who also are survivors of sexual trauma and abuse. And I just started working with them. I've been working with them for 2 weeks now, and those women are amazing and strong and been through what nobody really can imagine.
Do you have a contact number or something we could say out loud that for anybody who hear it and has an interest?
Oh, yes. So I would send you to our program, which is called the Imagination Workshop. Now, there's many imagination workshops out there, but we are imaginationworkshop.org, and it's the one under UCLA. And that website has some of our videos because we have been able to make videos with permission. Of course, it's therapy, so a lot of what we do isn't out in the public, but when we've done a play, then it's open to the public, and so there's been permission for the filming and photography. So imaginationworkshop.org, and then you'll see our videos. You'll also see the reports written by Dr. Victoria Stevens about how this work really helps. Yeah, and there's a donate button. I don't know if it works, but there's a reason why we never have any money. Our donate button never even works.
It's a hope button rather than an actual button.
Right.
Well, I think I got enough on that. So that's really great work, Wyeth. I'm really happy to hear about it.
Thank you.
So let me now start. It's another episode of Day Jobs, Night Gigs. My guest today has sung opera. She plays a flute, has performed in a Hawaiian ensemble and a ukulele trio, and sings a mean vaudeville music hall number. My guest today is Christina Lynn Hart.
Perfect.
So Christina, you started with the flute?
Yes. So I started as a child flute player. It really was, I don't think I naturally was a musician. I think that I was competing with my older brother, who was the ultimate classical music geek. And so I said, okay, I'm going to pick an instrument in the orchestra too, and I'm going to show him up. So that's really what it was about. I mean, if he was an athlete, I probably would be on my third hip replacement by now from trying to compete in that arena. So I picked up flute at age 8, and I went into a private flute teacher, and I said, I'm going to be the principal flute player of the Los Angeles Philharmonic. And she said, okay, well, then we'll train you that way. So I had really strict training. It was good. And I won some scholarships, played gigs as a teenager, and then I was accepted to Hamilton Music Academy, and right away was playing first flute in their orchestra. But then I was playing in the pit orchestra for a musical, and I said, I want to be up there. So that's when I wanted to switch.
Was your brother aware of your presence and his influence upon your musical choices?
My brother, if you remember when we did your play, Dan McLaughlin, Oh No, Not Emily, and my character was a Trekkie. And remember, I had all those Star Trek t-shirts from my brother, and he was like, well, I better get them back. I think he was aware of my very annoying presence for him. And I do have to say that I did show him up musically, and I think that bothered him.
Well, I'm glad the story has a happy ending. What did he play?
So he was a French horn player. Mm-hmm. And in our household, we only had classical music playing. That's just how I grew up. My father, European, and we were friends with many famous composers or family composers. For example, Arnold Schoenberg, of course, he was no longer alive when I was born, but his offspring, his sons, were very good friends with my father, and so his grandkids were. I grew up with them, and then we knew people like Ernst Krenek, and then Richard Wagner's great grandson or great great grandson was a friend of ours. So we went to Bayreuth when I was a kid. So we grew up with classical music, and my brother listened to nothing but classical music. There were three albums that we had that weren't classical. One was Bing Crosby's Christmas album. One was the Kingston Trio, and one was Harry Belafonte. And so that's why it was very exciting in my life later on that I got to sing a duet with the tenor of the Kingston Trio. Got to actually perform with the official Kingston Trio, the real Kingston Trio.
Do I detect a Germanic influence in your family history?
Very much so. My father escaped East Germany, and my mother was American, but she was studying German in Hamburg at the university where she met my father. And so, yes, we had very much friends with with Wagner's.
Did they play music?
My dad did play piano, but he didn't do it professionally. Although, he was trained at that level, but he didn't choose that for a profession. And then he did do the German diction coaching for LA Opera.
Have you ever performed with him and or your brother?
Never performed with my brother because my brother was never at my level. But sorry.
Well, I suppose we have to be honest, right? I mean,
no, but my brother just didn't go on to perform professionally. But my father and I actually produced quite a few shows together, which is why I then legally changed my name. Linhart was not my birth name. Linhart was my grandmother's name, my German grandmother, who was a singer, but the wars sort of got in the way of her career, and then she was stuck behind the Iron Curtain. But yes, my father and I produced several shows together, and a couple of them were in conjunction with LA Opera with their Ring Festival and a couple other.
Let's talk about your dad escaping. It's one of those bing, want to hear more about that kind of things.
Yes, so my father was about 5 or 6 when World War II ended, and he was in the outskirts of Dresden when Dresden was bombed. And so he remembers the bombing very well, and I think he was PTSD his whole life from that. He definitely had, and they didn't even know about PTSD back then or how to treat it. And we still don't really know how to treat it. You can't cure it. We're just working on ways of sort of alleviating the symptoms. So then he was stuck behind the Iron Curtain. He was in East Germany, and he escaped as a young adult. He was going to see a theater play. He was working in the theater as an assistant or an associate, and he had an invite to go across Berlin to West Berlin to see a production. And then he never went back. Although I know he did have to go back to get his mother somehow. And I'm not quite sure. I once interviewed him about how did that work, that he could go back and forth a couple times. But it was just on the train. The wall had not been built yet. Because I know he was able, because he had some work in the West, he was able to cross over. But pretty much they left with nothing. Like he went over and then I guess established himself and then went back to get his mother and brother. And so then he was in West Germany. And we never got to go back to East Germany until the wall came down. And then we went back to Dresden. And I always heard about Dresden was like this fairy tale land that I heard about in childhood that I never thought we'd see. And then next thing you know, I'm giving concerts in Dresden, and I end up being engaged to the Crown Prince of Saxony, which, Dresden is like the capital of Saxony, of that region, So then all these castles that were on loan to the state really belonged to my fiance's family. And that's the beauty of Europe, is that castles, and everyone thinks about castles and fairy tales, but castles have youth hostels in them and hotels and you can go to any old castle and have a cup of coffee. It's great though. It's beautiful. So it sounds so glamorous when I say, oh yeah, I gave concerts opening castles, the renovation of a castle. But then it's,
One thing we do have the 6 layers of separation thing going. Mm-hmm. And I do remember going through some of my dad's stuff and coming across a treasure trove of Viennese American literature in Los Angeles. And it seemed you were in a lot of them. And were you like on speed dial from the consulate anytime they needed like the flower of Germanic youth in Los Angeles. You were the one that there were a lot of pictures of you with people in like formal dress, and you had like a bouquet of flowers, and it was the opening of something or the closing of something, and you were the entertainment.
I love that flower of Germanic youth. Yes, so that was my niche, which we can get into later on about the importance of having a niche. That was my niche was German repertoire because I studied in Berlin in college. I went to USC, but during the summer I went to Berlin and I've just sit there in their bibliothek or whatever and listened to Marlene Dietrich recordings. And so I represented the city of Berlin for the Sister Cities event, and I would sing the national anthems for the German consulate. But I also would do things at Alpine Village, and for the there were several events that we did with there's an Austrian American Society with Liliana Popov and several of the ladies, and I did several concerts with them and. Yeah, so I mean, I didn't have speed dial then because I didn't have a cell phone, but yes, a lot of the Germanic repertoire and a lot with Nick Ariando, the accordion player, and through the Goethe
Well,
Institute.
actually, you can talk about the importance of niche now.
Mhm.
When I've hired musicians, have always been struck if you can't make a gig, you are kind of responsible for getting somebody else to replace you for that gig. And
Mhm.
you get a sense that it really is a network of people who know each other and can rely on each other to fill in for the mutual benefit of everybody.
Mhm.
Has that been your experience?
Well, they're definitely in the classical gigging world. I mean, in a lot of arts and entertainment, there often can be competition, but in the gigging world, people know. I mean, the ones who are really working know to be really good friends with the person who can do what they can do, because there will be a time when they get a gig, and it is the proper etiquette to replace that person. And I haven't always seen that. I've seen that more in the classical music world. I've seen that happen. For example, with my veterans, I needed a harp player from the California Philharmonic, which I used to work for. And she had committed yes, but then she got another gig that important for her in the long run. And so, but she found me somebody right away, which I was so pleased with because I have had situations not so much in classical music, but in other things where someone's just like, oh, can't do it. I'm out. So yes, in the classical music world, it's good to have people. Now, what I do is so kind of niche that, because I do this German cabaret that not a lot of people do, or I'll do opera with circuses, but and vaudeville, right? The classical singer in the circus show.
Do you write or compose as well?
Well, for my first two albums, the first one is called Circus Sanctuary, and the second one is Voodoo Princess. I helped arrange the music and I wrote all the lyrics. I wrote a little bit of the music, but not that much. My understanding of the chordal landscape is not vast. I'm always impressed with people who really know their chords. And so, what I did with those albums is I took classical tunes or Renaissance tunes and then made them modern. Like my Ave Maria has doo-wops and reggae, and that got some airplay for holiday season. Or I took an old Renaissance ditty, Bedlam Boys, and made it slightly sort of pop, hip hop. So, and then, but right now I'm on a project with two Austrian gentlemen, and we're doing some sort of electronica, which is stuff that I've never done before, but we're also using some German folk tunes, writing some of our own music.
I'm sort of jumping around here, but can you look at your resume and talk about some of the awards that you have won or significant achievements that you would like to share with us?
Yes. Well, when I was just out of college, I was associate directing and then associate producing at the Odyssey Theater. And we did a project called The Greeks. And we won the LA Weekly Production of the Year award. And so I received, as associate producer, Production of the Year award, which was exciting. And then I would say for my documentary Guantanamo Circus, we won the Hollywood Fame Award for 2013 Hollywood Fame Award, which was great because I got a plaque for Guantanamo Circus with a star that's done by the same artist who does the stars on the Walk of Fame. So even though it wasn't on the Walk of Fame, of course, we still got the same star that you get. So that was exciting.
So it segues me into the next question, which is you have a political component to your artistry? Question mark.
Well, I did. Now I'm feeling very either polypartisan or very open. I was back in the early 2000s, I was with the Billionaires for Bush, which was satire. And because I was very against the war. And so, I then affiliated with the other side, which was, more left-wing politics, because I just really felt the war was wrong. And I still feel that way. Veterans who come back from that. But and then when I went to Guantanamo, I was actually completely not political. And with our documentary, what I'm proud about is that some of the subjects who were in the documentary it was a varying spectrum of political parties. We had some people who were very right wing and very left wing. I mean, extreme. Although one can argue the far left and far right meet in the middle, but that's a whole different thing. But they were very opposing politically, and they all still liked the documentary.
Could you back up and talk about this documentary?
Yes, so it's called Guantanamo Circus, and it's about when I went with a circus with Count Smokula and Philip Solomon, if any of our listeners know about them, to Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. And this was 2006 at the peak of the controversy. Bush was still in office. And we went to perform, and I thought, we're going to perform for, the detainees for, and they're like, no, we're not bringing the circus to perform for the prisoners. You're supposed to say detainees. And I said, we're performing for the soldiers. Well, I'll wear something sexy. And they're like, no, keep it a family-friendly show. I'm like, family? They said, yeah, you're performing for the children of Guantanamo. And I kind of wish we'd titled the documentary The Children's Circus of Guantanamo Bay instead of just Guantanamo Circus. And we didn't plan on making a documentary. And one of our clowns surreptitiously shot a little bit, and it was on a really home janky video. But years later, in 2012, I decided to make a documentary about it. And the documentary is on Amazon Prime, Roku, and Pluto TV. It's just a half an hour. But so we didn't hammer in any kind of political message, but I think it sort of hinted at things. But I was really pleased to find that varying political spectrums all appreciated the documentary. And then I was flown into Brown University because Columbia University was having a Guantanamo symposium. And then I met, with people who had been commanders in Guantanamo or been medical in Guantanamo, et cetera.
What did the children of Guantanamo like most about your circus?
Phil Solomon, he's a circus in and of himself. They liked the fire. They liked everything he did. I mean, Phil would come out on bouncy stilts, and Phil would hula hoop, and although I have to say, actually, the act that got nixed was we had this amazing aerialist. The aerialist. Well, the soldiers really respected our aerialist, but she was originally going to do her grinder act, which she'd done on Letterman or Leno, one of those late night shows, where she has this metal groin and metal breastplate, and she just has this grinder between her, like a machete, what is a chainsaw or something between her and sparks. But when we were rehearsing, the admiral's wife saw it, and no, so that act got vetoed. But she did do her aerial act, and she's way up there on this pole. And I remember when I went with her to the gym in Guantanamo, and Guantanamo has all of the branches of the military. So there were all these beefy soldiers there working out at the gym. And she walks in and she just starts doing these pull-ups. And the whole gym just stops and their jaw drops because they see this gorgeous chick, this hot chick come in there and do pull-ups they could never do. She has muscles in her back they don't even have, she was so strong. And she's a vegan, she's got vegan tattooed on her ankle. So yeah, I think she was definitely the highlight.
I heard somewhere in there that you have an album.
Yes, so 2 albums long ago. One is Circus Sanctuary, and the other is Voodoo Princess. But to find them, I mean, they're on everything: Spotify, CD Baby, iTunes, which I think is now Apple Music, Amazon, even TikTok Sounds, if anybody uses TikTok and uses the sounds. I think Instagram Reels. It's pretty much anywhere streaming you can get the albums. But it's probably best to look up my name, because I think I did see a few other Voodoo Princesses out there.
Why
But
don't you spell that again for those of us who insist upon putting a D in it?
that's right. So it's Christina, which is Christina, Linhart, which is Linhardt.
Pronounced Lindhart for some reason.
Oh, it's pronounced Linhart. Everyone, like, I'm people like, Christina Lindhart. No, it's Linhart. So if you look at Christina Linhart on Spotify and all that, and then you can put in Circus Sanctuary and Voodoo Princess, and you'll see me with naked with clowns. Clowns aren't naked. I'm naked. The clowns aren't.
Well, that threw me off track. I have a couple of sort of what if questions.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you could go to any concert in the past or now for that, what concert would you most like to attend?
Wow.
The world is your oyster.
Yeah, that's a rough. That's opens up so much. Probably when there is a premiere of a Beethoven piece. I remember once in music history studying a concert, and you couldn't believe the amount of music that they play in one night. It was like 4 or 5 hour concerts. And I guess, well, yeah, because people don't have to get home to watch their favorite Netflix show or whatever they're doing. Perhaps the premiere of a piece by Beethoven, but then that's also so painful, because I know that he couldn't hear, and the pain emotionally that he went through, that he couldn't hear his music. So, I would say Beethoven's Ninth, but I would cry too much knowing that he can't hear it. Oh God, it makes me cry even just thinking about it. You hear about these wonderful things like when Afternoon of a Faun premiered in Paris, and the audience like went into a riot and an uproar. But then I also think about, I don't know, just back in the Middle Ages and hearing just some madrigal singing the way it's supposed to be done, or just maybe when Hildegard von Bingen is first. I mean, because it's not really a premiere, because she didn't think of it that way, but when a church service that Hildegard wrote a piece of music for.
Very cool. And this is kind of a related question. If you could perform with anyone from time now, going back to way back when, who would that be? And what do you see the context?
The first thing that comes to mind is Liszt. Even though I'm not the biggest Liszt fan, I mean, I don't know his repertoire that much. I know he was a rock star and he could do anything. So I would like to collaborate with him, that we write some new music that still flashes all that he can do. But then we might maybe rock it up a bit. So it's like classical rock. That's one thought. That's definitely one thought. I mean, I'm always a Handel fan. Like if I could sing an oratorio for Handel his first time.
One of the things I see in the way you sort of prepare is that you seem to be a very results-oriented performer. You seem to think about your role, what your role should look like. You then look in your personal toolbox of things you can do and approach it from that viewpoint. Is that an accurate thought, or?
Yes, because I was just so trained. I remember once, and this was years ago, somebody looked at my resume and he said, "What, you spend your whole life training?" And it was a rapper guy I was going to work with. He's like, "Man," and which has both its advantages and disadvantages, because the training can sometimes keep from the freedom. But I think it's always my biggest fear is to not be prepared, so I over prepare. Or so that I remember Alan Fogel, he was the principal oboe player of the LA Chamber Orchestra, and even though I didn't go to Cal Arts, my friends did, and I would play with him because Cal Arts, the faculty would play with the students. And he said, he had this concept that you have your practice bag, and so every time you're going performing, you reach into your practice bag and what comes up. So you want to keep practicing, so you have plenty of stuff in your practice bag to pull out. And so I think there's just always that of the training. And but I really envy people who just have a natural ability to improvise. Like I said, I don't feel I'm a natural musician, so I don't feel I have that natural ability. Dancing, I can improvise and be free with that because I didn't have much technique as a dancer. I trained later, and I trained and trained and trained, but I didn't have that childhood technique. So I feel freer in improvising dancing. And I have to say, the theater therapy that I do helped me improvise when it came to just, theatrical, because the whole purpose was you were improvising. But also, what was great about the theater therapy is that you weren't focusing on yourself and your role and how do I come off, because you're working with maybe a mental patient. And so in the scene, you're trying to, as your character, get them to communicate as their character. So you're thinking so much more about them and their character. And I realized that helped me let go of a lot of things. But there always still is that training, because last thing I want is like to be up there and I don't know what I'm going to do next.
Do you think there's a carry through between being prepared for music and sort of being prepared for a job, a day job, kind of, where somebody's paying you to be there?
Yes. And in fact, so I worked for many years for programs, not the theater therapy, but that used theater as academic intervention for at-risk youth. So like East LA Classic Theater or the Bridge program. And we would use theater with kids in disenfranchised communities. And the purpose was not to get them to be actors, although we trained them really, conservatoire type programming. But the point of it was, so if they knew how to get up there and present themselves, if they knew how to get up there and speak, we knew that could help them in a job interview. We knew that that could help them with skills in life. So there's so much about, if you have the confidence to get up there on stage and just speak and stand still, that will carry you over into a job interview, into corporate, anything in the job that you interact with other humans.
I think it also can give you a sense of what's the worst thing that could happen.
Mm-hmm.
That audiences in general want to be entertained, and they come with an expectation of liking it.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you carry that feeling forward into the workplace or the job place, it's only a good thing.
Yeah, I completely agree, because it is true that the audience for the most part is there, unless you've got somebody who's bitter or competitive or something. The audience, or some critic, the audience is there because they want to be there. They want to be entertained. They want to enjoy their moment. Their moment out from work and stress and life. And I agree that it's true. Once you've been up in front of an audience, especially in tights on a hay bale, it's true that it makes everything else so much easier. And you hear about people in the work profession that they say they're so scared of getting up in front of people, and not everybody had theater training, and so it can be very terrifying. And what's interesting is with some of my veterans, I had this one woman, she was amazing, and she had just been released from prison, but she had also been, I guess, in Iraq or Afghanistan, and she had jumped out of airplane after airplane, into combat. And yet she said, I can't play my role. I can't get up there. I said, I'm not going to say her name. I said, but you've jumped out of airplanes into combat. She's like, that's different. This is getting up in front of people. So, and I think they found that the number one fear for people is getting up in front of people. And at some point, we're going to have to do it, even if it's just up in front of one person for a job interview. And that's why I think that training, theatrical training or musical training, can really help people.
Oh, very cool. Do you have any further thoughts you'd like to share?
Well, if this podcast is for people who are in music or looking to start in music. We talked a little bit about niches and how to find a path, because it can be a very nebulous path. But what I noticed in college, because I went to USC, so it was in the heart of Los Angeles, and so already I knew how hard it was just to get an audience in LA. And that can then translate into just how hard it is to get a job, etc. And so I was even worried for my graduating recital. Would I have enough people come to my graduating recital? Because it wasn't like, a college in some small town where everyone came, And I noticed then I was going to recitals, and sometimes I went to somebody's doctoral recital that playing amazing music, and there were two people in the audience, which was really unfair. And so then, but then I noticed who has a packed house for their recitals, and often it was the Korean students who were part of a church, so their church community came out, or once it was a sorority girl. There weren't a lot of sorority or fraternity people in the music academy, but there was one girl who was in a sorority, and her audience was packed. And so I realized it was finding that niche, which then we talked about earlier about how I got a lot of work early on was German stuff, because I was doing the German cabaret and I knew the language, and you had a lot of these older emigres who wanted to hear that music that they knew more from their youth, like the Lehar and the Beretta and that sort of thing. So I think it's about finding, and then I moved on more into the circus, because that was just something that was in my heart. Because on my American side of the family, my grandparents and great grandparents were pharmacists, but it turns out we found out that the great grandparents were really medicine show hacks first, and then became pharmacists. But it made total sense to me why. Like now I know why I'm so attracted to the circus and the carnival, even though I was trained and raised as a classical person. So it's finding, but also like I said earlier, that I was usually the oddball out. It's finding that niche so that you fulfill a need. Because I see a lot of people who sing torch songs and sing torch songs beautifully, but there's enough people out there singing torch songs, or people who do cover songs, which is, it's finding that market, so to speak.
Well, Christina, it's been a pleasure and a joy. Tell us about the piece we're going to hear some more about.
So for my albums, as I mentioned before, I took public domain tunes and tunes that already existed, because I knew they were tried and true. Because sometimes we write a melody and we think it's the most beautiful melody, and but certain folk tunes are tried and true. And this was an opera aria. This is everyone knows it, especially with the advent of all these America Got Talent type shows. Is O mio babbino caro by Puccini. But I rearranged it and made it a little more sort of like Kenny G. There's some soprano sax on it, and I rewrote some lyrics and gave it more of a tropical vibe, because that whole album, Voodoo Princess, had a tropical vibe, because I wrote a lot of it when I was in Jamaica.
Let's take a listen to it. Wow, that was really good. Thank you. And you have another one?
Well, then the track that I have that received the most airplay was from my first album. If my first album was Circus Sanctuary, and this was Ave Maria, and I took Schubert's Ave Maria, but I wanted to make it a little more modern. And at first, it was the track we were having the hardest time figuring out, and I wanted to give it sort of a reggae backbeat, which we did. And but it's still just we didn't quite know where we wanted to go with it in the studio. And then I said to my producer, I said, "What if we put doo-wops in the back?" I don't know where that came from. And so we got in a guy who could do the doo-wops, and he laid down those doo-wops, and my producer turned to me and said, "You are not well." But he loved it, and it worked. And that actually it was able to break through into the adult secondary AC market, adult contemporary secondary market, just around the holidays, because it was a bit of a Christmas tune, because it was Ave Maria with reggae and doo-wops.
Well, let's take a listen.
Doo-wop-bop, 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 doo-wop-bop,
Well, that was really good. I really appreciated that. It again has been a pleasure. Feel free to come back anytime with other insights or other music. And it's been a pleasure and a joy.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me, and love to everybody out there.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Now I push the stop button. This has been another episode of Day Jobs, Night Gigs. My guest has been Christina Linhart. Questions and comments can be directed to her through us at djng@earthlink.net. Questions and comments on the webcast itself can also be directed to djng@earthlink.net. Want to be a guest on Day Jobs Night Gigs? Email us at djng@earthlink.net. Thanks for listening. See you next time.